When you hear the words human cloning, your brain immediately goes to Hollywood, secret labs, identical babies, sci fi horror. But what if I told you the word cloning appears in actual emails tied to Jeffrey Epstein? Not in a conspiracy forum, but in professional scientific correspondences. And what if those emails don't sound like fiction at all, but like planning? Tonight, we're not speculating. We're reading what's actually written.
There were so many. Charlie, there were thousands of people over 40 years. Epstein started doing this in the 1980s. There's not a single person in all that time who's publicly come forward and said, I was blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, you could write, if one story like that would sell $5 million in book sales, and nobody's done it. That's not to say that it's impossible, but you have a much, much more relevant and trackable issue here, which was the role as a financier. How do you always hear Epstein described? Disgraced financier. The whole thing was the money. The CIA's main job is finding money for its operations. They need to go through fixers, and this is the guy who's tied to the head of the CIA, the head of almost every major figure in Israeli intelligence, the head of every major arms broker in Saudi Arabia, the friends with most of the royal family in the UK, Spain, Egypt. This is the guy who does not know much about finance, but he can arrange the deals because he's got powerful friends behind him who are putting up the money.
Hello, guys. I'm Trixie Lane. I have a background in investigative work, mainly homicides and paralegal work. On my channel, you will see us covering true crime, previously covering the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, and now we have moved on to the Epstein files. One of the most important lines appears in a direct communication discussing embryo editing. An embryo editing technique more similar to cloning. That phrasing matters because this isn't tabloid language. It's scientific positioning. The writer is comparing approaches, suggesting one method is closer to cloning than another. This tells us something critical. They are not confused about what cloning is. They are differentiating methods. That means this conversation is occurring among people who understand embryo manipulation, genome engineering, and reproductive biology. This is not layman curiosity. This is technical. In another document, we see something structured, not a stray idea. A project outline titled Human Germline Genetic Modification. And under that, a section explicitly labeled Human Cloning. This isn't an offhand remark in an email. It's categorized. That tells us this topic was part of an organized intellectual framework. Now pause. This doesn't prove human cloning was performed, but it does prove cloning was conceptually included in a larger discussion about germline intervention. And germline modification is a serious territory because that affects future generations. Now, this is where it gets layered. There's an email exchange between George Church, a Harvard geneticist, and Jeffrey Epstein. And in that thread appears this phrase: raising funds for personalgenomes.org, which includes adult human tissue cloning and genome engineering. Now, we need to clarify something carefully. Adult human tissue cloning in scientific language usually refers to cellular cloning, not cloning an entire human being. That distinction matters, but here's what also matters. The phrase appears in a fundraising context, meaning funding scientific infrastructure and research ambitions. Cloning terminology is not hypothetical in this circle. It's operational vocabulary. Another document references embryo editing techniques and compares them to cloning. Embryo editing is not the same as SCNT, which is somatic cell nuclear transfer, but both intersect in reproductive bioengineering. In one background article included in the file set, somatic cell nuclear transfer is described as a method that, if used to term, could function as a pathway toward reproductive cloning. Again, this does not prove it happened, but it shows familiarity with the mechanics. And when multiple documents show germline modification frameworks, embryo editing discussions, and adult tissue cloning references, we are looking at a cluster of related technologies. Now, this is the question everyone jumps to. Was there a literal plan to clone people? Based strictly on the documents, there was no document stating we are cloning a human. There is no protocol, no lab execution record, no confirmed attempt. However, we know what we know. Cloning was happening. What there is conceptual inclusion of cloning within germline modification discussion, fundraising references that include tissue cloning and genome engineering, and email language explicitly comparing techniques to cloning. So if we reconstruct intent from tone and context, the plan appears to be explore advanced genetic technologies, position within embryo or germline modification space, fund or associate with researchers operating in genome engineering fields. That's what the paper trail shows. Now, there's some articles I'm going to be referencing. The Futurism article frames the idea around Epstein wanting to improve human DNA. The article emphasizes his interest in eugenics adjacent ideas. The Factually article pushes back, emphasizing there is no evidence that cloning was carried out. When we compare media to documents, the emails support interest in genetic engineering concepts and association with cloning terminology, but what they do not support is proof of reproductive human cloning, evidence of successful cloning attempts, or confirmation of a human clone. But again, we know what we know. We know that the royals were doing this for many, many decades and generations to come. So media framing often amplifies implication. Primary emails show interest, not execution. George Church is a Harvard geneticist who pioneers in genome engineering and is known for work in synthetic biology and CRISPR research. His email inclusion signals these conversations were happening within elite academic scientific circles. That does not imply criminal collaboration. It indicates access. There are other names appearing in the cloning adjacent threads, and these people are typically scientists in genetics, philanthropic intermediaries, and research foundation contacts. Their purpose appears aligned with funding channels, intellectual exchange, and research positioning, not clandestine lab execution, although we know what we know. What was the underlying objective implied? From the tone across the documents, there was interest in influencing human evolution, fascination with germline intervention, and the desire to be adjacent to frontier genetics research. That aligns more closely with ideological influence and scientific association, other than with secret cloning factories, which we all know exist. But the word cloning appears repeatedly, so it does tell us he was comfortable discussing frontier reproductive bioengineering topics. That's not sci-fi, that's documented. So here's the grounded truth. The documents show cloning terminology in serious scientific discussion. They show germline modification frameworks. They show fundraising tied to tissue cloning and genome engineering. They do not show proof of a cloned human. Interest? Yes. Execution? Not in the paper trail. And when we stick to what the documents actually say, the story becomes far more powerful than speculation.
They are not who you think they are. And they have been here a lot longer than you realize. That's Andrew Jackson for the uninitiated. And that is Andrew Jackson's wife. Andrew Jackson's wife and Miss Maxwell. And like I said, they are not who you think they are. But it's not just them. It's all of them. They have been here a lot longer than you realize. That's General Patton. And these are a whole bunch of sports stars. Tom Brady, Larry Hagman, Houdini, Joe Burrow, Mickey Mantle, Christian McCaffrey, Kobe Bryant, Wilt Chamberlain, H.P. Lovecraft, Michael Phelps, Travis Kelce, the guy who created the Pony Express, Michael Jordan, and Jackie Robinson. It's all of them. Teddy Roosevelt, Robin Williams who is supposedly dead but is now Uncle Pappy, who literally age reduced to become this guy, young Uncle Pappy, Blair. Viggo Mortensen, Kirk Douglas, Richard and Karen Carpenter, who are literally now Dexter, aka Michael C. Hall and Celine Dion. The entire cast of Seinfeld, who all used to be other known actors, stars. If you can't see that Kramer used to literally be Dean Martin, well then you should probably get your eyes checked. Do you really think Taylor Swift just resembles the Church of Satan's Zena LaVey that much? No, that's her. Do you really think Hugh Jackman just resembles country singer who died at age 33, Keith Whitley, that much? No, they're the same entity. They're not human. They're fallen angels who have been here all along. That's Rudolph Steiner, who became Keith Whitley, who became Hugh Jackman. That's Dale Earnhardt, who supposedly hit a wall, and that's Morgan Wallen. I don't just speculate on this. I don't just mash faces together and say they're the same. I provide evidence. Evidence like Morgan Wallen having a gaping scar under his right eye. Kind of like, exactly like Dale Earnhardt, who hit a wall. A wall, Morgan Wallen. They're mocking you, and I'm trying to help you. And it's all of them, even your heroes like Tom Brady with the exact same butt chin as I Dream of Jeannie star Larry Hagman, the exact same lips and nose and forehead wrinkles and hairline. But it's not just the symmetry, folks. I don't speculate. I prove, because even though they can shapeshift, their markings, their scars, their physical markings remain the same, kind of like these two and those two on Larry Hagman and Tom Brady. And they always tell us,
yes, Julian, watch out, I'm still coming for you. You're getting older and I'm staying the same age. He really is. I mean, just look at it. We want to see how you...
Look out, Julian, you're getting older and I'm still staying the same age. And then the other guy says, yes, he is. Funny how his style hasn't changed over the years. They're mocking you. And I'm here trying to help you, show you that you live in a spiritual world run by shape-shifting fallen angels. And as crazy as you might think that sounds, it's reality. But of course, all this is for entertainment purposes. I don't care about liberating humanity from these fallen ones. No, do it for the views. I'm a satire account. Entertainment only.